You're listening to the Undisputed Wrestling Show on the Angry Marks Podcast Network, featuring the bearded wonder Zane Paisley, Sign Guy, Drew Skills, and the Morning Star, William Huckabee.
And the Undisputed Wrestling Show starts now.
Right on. It is another Tuesday night. You are rocking with the best. The Undisputed Wrestling Show is here, and we got a great show. Just like last week, just like every week, another great show planned for you. Some great guests lined up for tonight. I can't wait to get started. First, let me introduce my co-host for the night. We got none other than Kevin Sullivan's favorite referee. The guy Kevin Sullivan says the best referee he's ever been in the ring with. He said it right here on the Undisputed Wrestling Show. You can check it out in the archive. We got Sign Guy. How you doing, Sign Guy?
Doing very well, Mr. Skills.
Right on, my friend. And then we also have from out in North Carolina, we have the incredible Hulk, the Morning Star, Will Huckabee. How you doing, Will?
Man, I'm doing great, man. You know, celebrated a good weekend, good Mother's Day weekend and stuff with the mom and the mother and the grandmother and stuff. And I'm ready to hit this thing and get it started, bro.
Right on, man. I am excited about this show. Like I said, we got some great guests. We're going to go ahead and get it kick-started right off with our first guest, a guy that I've been anxiously waiting to get on the show, a guy who's been tearing it up for years. This guy has been a OVW Southern Tag Team Champion, OVW Heavyweight Champion multiple times, 3 times WWE Tag Team Champion, 2 times NWA World Heavyweight Champion, and 2 times in current NWA Tag Team Champion. This guy is one of my biggest nemesis in the ring, but outside the ring, I got nothing but the utmost respect. Tonight we got Iron Man, Rob Conway, on the call. Rob, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm doing even better now that you gave me such a big build-up. It felt like you were talking about somebody else.
Oh, no, I'm talking about you, and we could go on and on and on with your accolades, my friend, because you've done it. You've done it, and you've done it big. What we like to do here for our listeners, especially first-time guests, is kind of talk a little bit about what you got started and what got you started in the wrestling business and how you did that. What kind of drug you to this crazy world?
Man, I think like most of the people listening out there, turning it on TV as a kid and just falling in love with it. You know, I mean, what I grew up watching was the USWA with Jerry Lawler and Dutch Mantell and Macho Man Randy Savage. And then later on, watching the WWF. And then I played basketball in high school and baseball, and then played college basketball, then got into weightlifting. I mean, I never thought I could get into wrestling. I mean, I just watched it on TV. How does a guy from New Albany, Indiana get into professional wrestling? But of all things, after I got into bodybuilding, I was driving down the street, going to work, and looked over, and there was a sign that said, "The Nightmare Danny Davis School of Professional Wrestling, live events Sunday at 7 p.m. And that just happened to be, later on, become Ohio Valley Wrestling. So I never knew that there was anything outside of the WWF and WCW at the time. So I just stopped in on a Sunday and watched it, and I thought, man, I can do that. Not only can I do that, but I can do that better than any of those guys. And then I joined, and I told everybody I was going to be a professional wrestler. I went to that, first training class, and it was 1,000 times harder than I ever thought it was going to be. And the guys that I thought, hey, I'm going to be better than them, they were good. They were just so good already that they made it look easy. So that's how, in 1997, I joined the Ohio Valley Wrestling when it was just called pretty much the Danny Davis School of Wrestling, and just stuck with it. Once I told everybody I was going to do it, I had to do it. And then I'm one of those people who loved watching it as a kid and loved watching as an adult, but when I got into it, I started to love it even more.
For sure. How long were you in and then got the developmental program?
I started in 97, and then they didn't have a developmental territory at that time. There were still a few territories left where guys would, just get experience. And then in 1999, that's when WWE or WWF at the time started Ohio Valley Wrestling as being a developmental territory. and they signed Nick Dinsmore and Flash Flanagan. And that was the two guys that were already OVW guys. And then they started sending us people that they'd signed from all over the country. And then the next year in 2000, they signed me and a guy who was wrestling as Damaja, but later became Danny Holly in WWE. So it was 2000s when I got signed, but I'd wrestled, all the shows and did all the practices from 97 to 2000 before I got signed.
Right on. Always the different eras, you always hear about different guys and how these guys are the top guys and things of that nature, great technicians and guys that really got it. When I got started at Les Thatcher's Main Event Pro Wrestling Camp in Cincinnati, the two names that were really prominent at that time were Rob Conway and Nick Dinsmore. Tell us a little bit about you guys' relationship.
Well, I met Nick actually when he was in high school. He's a couple years younger than me, and I was getting ready for a bodybuilding contest, and his strength coach at his high school was the guy that was helping me. So I'd come to his school to talk to the strength coach, and I'd see him there. He was a football player. So then a couple years go by, and I hear that he's he started in wrestling before I did. So, I didn't really, know him real well or anything, but like when I saw that the Danny Davis had the school and I went and he was part of it, I just looked his number up in the phone book and called him and said, "Hey, man, this is Rob Conway." Almost like, "Hey, I know you know who I am." "Hey, what do you think about that wrestling?" And he was just like, "Well, I think you'd be good at it, but you need to talk to Danny Davis. You need to talk," he wouldn't give me any information. So once I signed up and started training, Danny, from day one, he made me a team with Nick. So me and Nick teamed for about the first year and a half of my career, pretty much all the time. And then eventually we became the guy. I've wrestled him, I think 197 times, and we've teamed like 205 times. It's something like a lot to be with one guy. So we had a good run together, and then we wrestled each other, when we split up for years and years. And then when we went to the WWE, his very first match in the WWE as Eugene was against me.
How ironic.
Yeah, so we started wrestling each other in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and we've wrestled each other in Europe and Australia and all over the place over the years.
That is amazing. That's awesome. Everyone, of course, now knows about NXT and the developmental center, the performance center, and how amazing that place is. But before those things, there was places like OVW and HWA and Deep South and places like that were developmental territories. And OVW really was just a breeding ground for some really great talent. You and Nick, and as far as coming up to the WWE, of course, Prototype with John Cena, Leviathan turned into Batista, and Randy Orton, and Brock Lesnar, and Shelton Benjamin. Tell us a little bit about your time there while it was a developmental and working with these guys.
Well, it was like every week, they were sending us some new guy who had zero experience but looked like $1 million and was a great athlete. And that's the thing. I can remember the first time I seen Brock, I was just like, oh my goodness, look at this guy. He's going to be a star. Batista. One of my friends got there before me and said, "Hey man, wait till you see this guy. He's huge." I thought, man, I hear that all the time. And then when I saw him, he barely fit at the doorway. His shoulders were so big. He was like 330 pounds back then, like 30 more pounds than he was when he was in the WWE. But the thing about it is they kept sending it. Some guys didn't make it. There's a lot of guys that didn't make it. But those guys, your Batistas and your Randy Ortons and your John Cenas and your Brock Lesnars, Shelton, they all worked so hard. And that's the things people don't realize is that those guys become top guys for a reason. You have to have something about you that's special. For the most part, any of those guys, if they're in a group of people, they just have a charisma that stands out. Then you put that they're 250 and 60 and 300 pounds and great athletes, and then they have the right training. there's no question why they're there. But like most of those guys, you know, when people ask me a lot of times, you know, oh, you trained with Cena and Brock and those guys, how were they? I said, man, they all worked hard. You know, Brock was in charge of the ring truck. You know, we all set up the ring. When he got called up, Cena was in charge of driving the ring. So the guys, you know, even though they were under developmental contract, they didn't have like a free pass where they didn't have to work hard and they didn't have to set up the ring and set up chairs and break it down and pay their dues. But there were times where we would practice, and we usually practice for about 3 hours every day, and we had 3 or 4 shows a week that we had to, because we only had one ring. Sometimes we'd have to stop practice after like an hour and a half because the mat was so sweaty that you couldn't move on it anymore. You couldn't run, or because everybody worked so hard, because they wanted to get, everybody saw their eye on the prize. You know, hey, they want to go and be on Raw or SmackDown. So they weren't down there screwing around and, you know, just collecting a check. Every one of those guys were like, man, the harder we work now, the faster we can get to being good.
Right on. Right on. You talk a little bit about the eye on the prize and getting to the main roster and be on there. How was it for you when you got that call that we got an idea, we got a plan for you, we got a vision, and it's your time? How was that for you? And how'd that go down?
Well, it didn't exactly happen that way. You know, now with NXT, guys will develop a character, a persona, and work on it for, you know, 3 months to a couple of years and then get called up. Originally, I was brought up because one of the writers saw that I wore pink trunks. So he wasn't like, oh, man, this guy's a great wrestler. He went, oh, he wears pink trunks. And Stevie Richards and Victoria wear pink. Why don't we bring him up and make him a team with Stevie Richards, you know? So I came up to his team with Stevie Richards, and I was going to wrestle Tommy Dreamer that night on TV. And they gave me my paperwork to where I was going to start traveling to the live events. And then about 7 o'clock, right before, maybe a little early, right before the doors opened for the show, Johnny Ace came to me and said, hey, Robbie, we decided to shit can your match tonight. You're not on the road anymore.
Wow.
So you know, you always like, man, anytime you think you're going to debut, you're like, I believe it when I see it. You know, you're not cashing the check until it gets in your hand. So I was immediately like, oh, no, man. You know, it was really depressed. You're really down about it. And then they came to me before the event was over and said, we're going to bring you back next week. We have another idea we think will be better. So they brought me back the next week. And at the time, I had about shoulder-length, curly blonde hair, similar to like Ken Patera used to have. And they brought me in and said, hey, Johnny Ace actually had me sit in the chair for Jan, the lady that does hair and makeup, and said, cut off all his hair like he's in the military. And I remember going, what? Huh? And so they filmed it just so they would have it, me getting all my hair cut off, and gave me then told me, hey, we're going to have you come out of the crowd and in a military uniform. And pretty much at the time, I wasn't supposed to join La Resistance. I was just going to be affiliated with them as a singles guy. But I mean, that was a big change from being the week before when I was going to debut with the pink trunks and the blonde hair. They were going to make me Victoria's boyfriend, and I was going to be called the Golden Boy. And the next week, I'm literally beating the Dudleys up and leaving them laying on Raw with the tag team champions. So that's how quick things change.
Wow. So this is the Undisputed Wrestling Show on Angry Marks Podcast Network. And we're talking with Rob Conway. We're talking about kind of how he got started and his debut in WWE. I can talk to Rob on that, but I don't want to hog the conversation. So I'm going to pass it over to one of my podcast tag team partners. Sign Guy, take it away, buddy.
Thank you, Mr. Skills. Well, Mr. Conway, I know that one of the things that you have done in your career is wrestle on the A Night for Billy shows that were for Lupus. They were ran by my good friend Chris Caliber. Can you tell us about some of the benefit shows you've been on, like A Night for Billy, and what they mean to you personally to be able to do?
Man, I've done hundreds of either fundraisers or benefit shows, and there's a difference between the two, because a fundraiser, you're just raising money for something, but part of the proceeds go to the wrestling company too. But a benefit show usually means that all of the proceeds are going to a cause or a charity. So those, you really know that you're there for one reason, to help a particular cause, whether it be a lupus, which for me was real close because, within a year of the first event that he did, my cousin passed away from lupus. I don't think people out there maybe know that it's as serious of a disease as it is. It's so anytime you can raise money, especially raising money for less fortunate people, and that's not necessarily less fortunate because they don't have money, but like as a professional wrestler, we're usually in the prime of our life, in the prime shape. So when you're raising money for someone else who, didn't get the genetics, they may be sick from the get-go, and they never were the star athlete. So we get to do something that we really enjoy doing, and at the same time, raise money for people who wish they were doing what we are doing. Sometimes they just wish they could get up and, and just walk around in daily life. So, yeah, it's always me. I just am a real stickler when it's a benefit show to make sure that all of the proceeds are going where they're supposed to go, because, that's just something that's important to me. But yeah, those Night for Billy's, seeing how much it meant to Chris Caliber, I wish we were still doing them, because I think that he was doing that Night for Billy for all the right reasons.
Agreed. You happen to be a semi-regular at Hoosier Pro Wrestling, where both of us happen to be in the Hall of Fame, and that's been a company that has been around for quite some time. You've had a few different stints there. What do you think of the fans there in Columbus, Indiana, and how that organization is ran?
Well, the thing about Hoosier Pro is, other than maybe one or two times a year, the first Saturday of the month, you're going to have HPW. And I think, the people in Columbus count on that. And it's kind of ingrained in their brain that they can take their families and they can go and have a great night out the first Saturday of the month. And Jerry Wilson is always bringing in not just the guy, his normal guys, but he brings in people who they would enjoy seeing. He brings in Tommy Rich, at least once a year. He brings me in. He brings in Jillian Hall. He's Eugene. People, a lot of times people who have gone on to make a name for themselves outside of this area, but still love to come to Columbus or Indianapolis or Jeffersonville, places that are still close to their heart. So now, Jerry, I have nothing but respect for Jerry Wilson, who's the promoter at HPW. I worked for him when I first started in OVW. He's one of the first guys that ever paid me to wrestle. Les Thatcher was the first person to ever pay me to wrestle, because, when I was new, I wouldn't pay to see myself, and I know none of the fans were. So I was just lucky to be getting some experience and get a chance to, I always say they don't pay you to go to college. So you got to learn somewhere. And Jerry's always given young guys an opportunity, as well as, he's had guys that's been with him for years. But that's the thing about HPW. They run a great event. You're going to get a good, solid night of action. And the first Saturday of the month, right there at the 4-H Fairgrounds building. You don't have to, like clockwork, man. For, what is it, 17 years now?
Yes, sir.
It's, yeah, that's amazing. And there's people that come to me sometimes, and they'll say, the thing is a guy, in my mind, he doesn't look like he's much younger than me. And he'll go, man, I've grown up watching you. I'm like, oh my goodness. But yeah, HPW, 17 years and going strong. I'm proud to proud to say that I'm get a chance to wrestle there at least 2 to 3 times a year.
And last year you were inducted into the Hall of Fame, like we said. Probably a pretty big honor to get recognized from a company that's been with you for most of your career.
Oh yeah, I mean that's something that, you know, sometimes when you think of a Hall of Famer, you know, a lot of times in my mind I still think of the guys that I grew up watching. I don't think of myself. But, you know, like I said, once I've been doing this for 19 years now, so that's a pretty long career, even though, you know, you try to look forward and not look backwards. But when you get an honor like that, it makes you think, yeah, man, I have had, you know, somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 matches. You know, that's in 19 years of wrestling is a long time. And even when Drew was saying some of the things that I've accomplished, people put their faith in me to, you know, for me to represent their company. You know, it means a lot when someone acknowledges it, especially somebody who I have a lot of respect for, like Jerry Wilson.
Like Drew was saying, you've held multiple titles in the NWA, including the World Heavyweight title. I happen to work at the NWA affiliate in Portland, Oregon quite a bit, and we're very proud to be an NWA affiliate. What's your thoughts on the current landscape as far as the NWA is concerned?
I think that the National Wrestling Alliance is stronger than it's been. I would say it's stronger now over the last maybe 4 years than it was previously, you know, going back to maybe 10, 15 years. And it's what it is because people who are wrestling fans want to see professional wrestling. And the WWE is a fantastic company, but they're leaning more toward entertainment and sports entertainment. And the guys are great athletes and they have great matches, but there's a little bit more backstage interviews or vignettes and talking. And I think that when people come to the live NWA shows, we have 30 affiliates in the United States and one in Australia, that because we're not television based at this time, we're wrestling based. And I think with 30 affiliates that run either monthly or weekly, we have more events and employ more wrestlers, you know, as independent contractors than any other company in the world. But what we're missing and we're working hard to get is national television. And I think, you know, all of the places that you go that are affiliates, the fans love it, you know. So now if we could bring it to them all at once through national television, that's the next step. Whereas like TNA, for example, they do a good job they're more of a sports entertainment company too, but they don't have a lot of live events. We have hundreds of live events a year. We just don't have that one television show. We've got multiple TV shows in local markets, but we don't have that one to showcase everyone that we have. And I think that's the next step. National television, I think we would be the top professional wrestling company. We're never going to try to compete with the WWE because they don't do professional wrestling. They do sports entertainment. We want to be, you know, 180 degrees away from that.
Well, at this point, I'm going to tag in our other co-host, Will Huckabee. So, Huck, floor is all yours.
Thank you, Sign Guy. Mr. Conway, first of all, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. My first question is this, and I'm going to have to preface it. When you first got into the business, you know, I would like to assume that when you got to business, you got there at the very beginning of what I would like to call the body era. Of course, there were guys before you, Lex Luger, Superstar Billy Graham, guys like that who had the quote-unquote bodybuilder look. But when you first broke into WWE and got called up from OVW, that's when a lot of the guys on the roster really had that very bodybuilder athletic look where you could tell that they spent a lot of time in the gym. And now, 19 years later, you know, you're still putting a lot of guys to shame, especially on the indies as far as looks go. In your opinion, how important is the visual aspect of being a professional wrestler?
You know, for me, it's very important because I've set a precedent for myself. And if someone books the Ironman Rob Conway to come to an event and I showed up 30 or 40 pounds overweight wearing long tights or something, I think people would be disappointed, you know. But if someone is a good enough athlete and has a good, you know, has charisma, then I don't want to say that your look isn't important, but it's, you know, Dusty Rhodes was never a body guy, but he exuded confidence and charisma and ability. For me, I was already in bodybuilding shape for the most part before I started wrestling. So, I mean, I would just enjoyed physical fitness. Like I said, I played college basketball and I started lifting weights, and I was one of those people that just really enjoyed doing it. So when I got into wrestling, it was like, man, goes hand in hand with eating healthy and working out. So, but for me, you know, just as a student of wrestling, if a guy walks out the curtain and you have no idea who he is, and he looks like $1 million, he's 6'3" or 4" and 250 pounds and looks great, you're almost going to go, wow, let's see what this guy can do. You know, people see him on the street and go, man, I don't know who that guy is, but he's got to be somebody, because he just doesn't look like a normal dude. Kids are enamored with muscles. You know, they want to touch them and take pictures with them like a superhero. Now, if the second guy comes through the curtain and he just looks like the dude that lives next door to you, on first glance, you're not going to pay much attention to him when he walks out. He's almost going to have to do something extremely extraordinary from the time he gets in the ring to attract your attention. So it's almost like, especially when you're new, if a guy walks out and looks like $1 million, and, you know, as long as he doesn't screw up too bad in 5 or 6 minutes, you're not going to think any less of him. But a guy who looks like not much, he's going to have to come out and really knock your socks off to get you to notice him. It's almost like, you know, for us, you know, you see a pretty girl and she catches your eye. As long as she doesn't say anything too mean to you, you're still going to think she's attractive.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. My next question is this: when you this is back into the beginning of your career, and even now, because I had the fortune and the opportunity to actually meet you and get some advice from you at NWA Smoky Mountain. And I don't know if you remember me or not. I had a match with Jax Dane and stuff, and you gave me some really good critiques and advice after the match that I use to this day, and I actually pass on. With that being said, when you first started hitting the roads and stuff, who were some of the guys who actually said, hey, kid, get in the car, we're going to take you on the road with us, and kind of taught you the ropes and gave you advice and critiques and stuff?
Man, to be honest with you, that never happened. Never rode with anybody who was more experienced than me. Because from the get-go, I started in Ohio Valley Wrestling, and instead of us having to travel, like I would go to Music City, but it would be me and Nick Densmore and a couple OVW guys. We would get there and we would get advice from Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson and Dutch Mantell and, you know, Jerry Lawler and guys like that, but I never got to ride with them. But in Ohio Valley Wrestling, like my first year, we trained 2 days a week, and I had 167 matches in front of people. But we didn't drive more than a couple hours at a time because it was more of a local circuit. So as far as getting advice from the veterans, it was always already at the show. It wasn't getting to ride with them because our drives weren't very far back then. But yeah, I mean, I was so fortunate that early on, even before developmental, Jim Cornette used to come there. And they, you know, Danny had Rip Rogers, I wrestled him like my first probably 25 matches. And they would bring in Dan Severin, like I said, Ricky and Robert and Buddy Landell, a lot of guys and the Southern guys. So they were always real nice and let it pick their brain. But then when it became a developmental territory in 99, everyone came to us. We didn't have to go anywhere. Arn Anderson, Jerry Lynn, Godfather, Dean Malenko, Fit Finley. I mean, they would come and be there. Dave Taylor, they'd come and be there all week. Like a different guy would come every week. You know, Dr. Tom, Big Boss Man. I mean, and they would stay and they would do our TV. And a lot of times me and Nick would either get to wrestle them or get to have them, you know, in our corner. So, I mean, I didn't really get to travel on the road because we didn't have to go too far, but they came to us. Bobby Eaton, everyone you can think of at some point that had been in the WB would come to OVW and spend a week, and we would just be like sponges. And they were always really nice about letting us ask questions and telling us there's no stupid questions. So I didn't get that, you know, going up and down the road. That's one thing that didn't really prepare me for. When I went to the WWE and started traveling a lot, you know, I had never flown a lot and driven 300-400 miles at a time. Took some adjusting to do. Now I do it all the time. And if you're a professional wrestler, you're basically a professional driver.
Oh, exactly, without a shadow of a doubt. So my last question before I pass it back to Drew and stuff. After your release from WWE and stuff, back in the movies and stuff, it's like as of, you know, the last 5 to 6 years, it's been the Rob Conway show, and with no disrespect whatsoever, you know. You at one point was the hottest thing in professional wrestling as far as that was not WWE. What do you contribute? What do you say is the reason for that? You know, one minute, you know, you're doing shows and stuff, and then the rebirth of the NWA, and you're picked as that guy to lead the charge of the NWA into the 21st century. And all of a sudden, you're everywhere, and everybody's talking about you, and you're all over social media, whether people are tweeting you and you're trending worldwide or whatever. What do you contribute that to? And not only that, but your longevity.
Well, I mean, when I was in the WWE, you know, from 2000 to 2007, I started wrestling in 97. So by the time I left the WWE, I'd only been wrestling for 10 years. Well, back in the day, 10 years was, you're just now starting to figure it out a little bit. You know, Macho Man Randy Savage and Jerry Lawler, they were wrestling, you know, 10, 15, 20 years before they even got to the WWE. So a lot of times now, the guys that are, you know, on TV, you know, they only wrestled 2-3 years and then they're on TV. And then when they get out of it, they pretty much quit. You know, they'll do independence for a short period of time while their name is still popular and then move on to something else. Well, I mean, I love wrestling. And so it wasn't like I was just doing it to make money. So when I left the WWE, I really felt like, hey, man, I can still get better. I can still get a lot better. And when I was there, you know, it's more of a television show. You'd kind of you're the character they want you to be, and you say what they want you to say. And if it doesn't get over, you know, it really should be their fault. They wrote it. But it's kind of not. So when I went on the independent scene, I was just like, hey, man, I'm going to do and be the character and be what I want to be, what I feel like I grew up watching. And I feel like when you bring Rob Conway in, even though I've been, you know, as of, like I say, in August, it'll be 19 years, you're going to get a guy who shows up in shape and is ready to work. You know, I'm not one of those guys who, you know, I've had people come up and tell me they appreciated the fact that I went out and had a hard-hitting competitive match, because a lot of times in some of the smaller towns, they said, when someone who's had television exposure comes there, they pretty much just sign autographs and, you know, have a 1 or 2 minute match and that's it. So I think my longevity has been because, one, is I love this business and I love professional wrestling. And I think that the fans that come to the shows can sense it, that I enjoy it and that I want to be there. And then the other thing is the other wrestlers too. You know, if someone asks me to watch their match and give them some advice, I will. If they don't ask me for advice, I don't give it. I'm not one to go around telling people, hey, you should, you know, hey, if you want it, you know, I'll give it to you. If you don't, then that's fine too. And I think that just building those relationships with the newer guys and trying to help them has helped me as well. But as far as like getting my name out there with the NWA, I think I think a lot of it has to do with that I'm willing to lace up my boots and work really hard every time that I am at an event. Well, be an example for the younger guys.
Well, like I said, you know, 2 years ago, I was fortunate enough to meet you and stuff, and of course, like any smart wrestler, you know, the NWA World Champion is in the building. Obviously, you want him to watch your match and, hey, thinking, critiquing. Like I said, the advice that you gave me that night, I still use on to this day and stuff. And it has helped me and my in-ring products so much. With that being said, I'm going to pass it back to Drew Skills. Drew Skills, what do you have for Mr. Conway?
Well, this is the Undisputed Wrestling Show on the Angry Marks Podcast Network. And Rob was just talking about, you know, not phoning it in and giving it 110% every time he's in the ring. And I can attest to that. And I can tell you there's a couple times where I wouldn't have been upset if he'd have pulled his cell phone out and called it in a little bit. Man, talk about going hard. This guy still goes hard. Rob, you've wrestled all over the world. What are some of the differences in styles? We talked before about you, the time you spent in Japan and wrestling with Liger and things of that nature. What's the differences in styles to you?
The big thing about Japan is the fans there respond more to moves. I mean, they like, you know, strikes, hard-hitting strikes, but they like moves, and they appreciate technical skill. And I'm not saying that the American crowd doesn't appreciate technical skill so much as because I don't speak Japanese, the only way I can communicate for the most part is through physicality. But over here, you know, we're a little bit more accessible to the fans. A lot of times I call them our NWA family, you know, because without them, there's no, you know, we're all in the same boat. They're coming to watch us, and we're coming to put the effort out to entertain them. But there's more storytelling, not just on the microphone, but through the physicality. Whereas in Japan, it's more it's more athletic, move based. You know, when I was growing up, for the most part, you were more concerned with who won and who lost, not did Jerry Lawler get a particular move in. I didn't even know what moves he did. You know, that Macho Man dropped the elbow and Lawler pulled the strap down. For the most part, we weren't critiquing them based on, you know, their athletic moves during the match. I just knew that I wanted the good guy to win and I was wanting the bad guy to lose. And I think that Japan, they appreciate whether you're coming out as a fan favorite or not, they appreciate effort and skill and athleticism. And I think a lot of crowds here in the States, they just want to see the guy that they like, you know, prevail. And it doesn't really matter as much how he does it or what moves he uses.
Right on. That's the differences in Japan and here. What do you think as far as time-wise from the late 90s getting started there and then up until now, if it, you know, from back in the end of the territory era to the indies today and the difference in the product from WWE to today? What are some of the biggest differences you see time-wise?
Well, the biggest thing that I noticed is when I was watching WWF, like even say the late to mid 90s, and you can attest to this, man, because you've been around, you know, same length of time as I have, traveled a lot of the same circles, but it seemed like every person on the television was a star. And if he wasn't a star, it was someone who was basically a non-WWF or WCW guy who was getting sacrificed. You know, it was a guy that wasn't a regular talent, that wasn't under contract, and he did, you know, when he went out there, you looked at this guy going, man, this guy's going to get it. But most of the guys who were the regulars, everyone, for the most part, was on there every single week in some capacity, and they were all stars. Now, even though they have 3 hours now, it seems as though they have a few mega stars, and then it drops off. It seemed like in the 90s, everyone who was on the show was a top tier superstar in their own right. And what do you think about that? Because, like I said,
I definitely agree with you. That is a big difference, I believe, and as well as I think it was more so based on you know, like you said, superstars, but main event matches and promoting the matches. Where now it's more so promoting the brand than the actual people in the matches that are taking place.
Yeah, because when I started wrestling, like say the Nation of Domination, if they came out for a match, even if only one of them had a match on the whole show, the whole group came out, and they all had something to do within that segment, whether it was talking, getting involved somehow. So they would manage to get more guys on the show in meaningful spots in 2 hours than what they do now in 3 hours.
Definitely. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. One of the other things I think has changed just more so in the industry is, I know you talked about how hard you worked and how much harder it was than you thought it was going to be, and it was exactly the same with me. You know, I've been an athlete my whole life and always wanted to be a fan, and then actually starting that training and realizing how hard it was, was a shocker. And I'm sure we've both seen people come in and last a day, a week, things of that nature. I think one of the other differences is, it's so much easier to get into the industry now than it was back then.
Oh, yeah. Now there's guys that I have seen that didn't really make it even at the local level. They were like, man, this guy's really not very good. But if he hangs around long enough, then he becomes a trainer, because the young guys don't know that that he's not good. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, I've had people say, hey, so-and-so said he would train me. And I said, well, OVW is right across the river, or you could go to NWA Supreme. They have training there. And they're like, yeah, but this guy said he'll do it for this much. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, of course he'll do it cheaper. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't have a ring.
Right.
You kind of get what you paid for. That's for sure.
Most definitely. Huckabee was talking about when he was privileged to share a locker room with you, and you shed some advice on him. And I know there's been several times, you and I have went to war together, and I've learned so much from it and from our talks. And what advice would you give, just, general advice to some young guys out there who unfortunately haven't had a chance to meet Rob Conway in a locker room?
Man, I would tell them to, try to get with a veteran and listen to him, someone that you have respect for, and not just having respect for them because they've been doing it for a long time. Respect because they've been good and that they're known as being good, and try to be a sponge and listen more than you talk. And then to stay humble, because at some point, every wrestler in his career is going to think that he is better than he is. We all get full of ourselves at some point, even if it's for a week or a day or a year, just to stay humble and realize to be nice to all your coworkers, because it's just important, to make it, be the best guy in your promotion or the best guy in your state or the best guy in the country. You have to be able to show up on time. Is this guy easy to deal with? The days of being a crazy wild man that maybe shows up and doesn't show up. That's not going to, you have to be a fairly responsible human being, first. And then, as far as your character goes, once the lights come on, you can be whatever. But when it comes to not burning any bridges and not showing up for shows. Those are no-nos. When your picture's on the poster and somebody's taking their kid to see that show and your picture's on the poster and you're advertised, then you have to be there.
Right on.
My first advice would be, hey, go to college. I mean, if any relative of mine said, hey, I want to be a wrestler, I say, first thing you do is go to college. Because that shows that you have if I was in the WWE and I was hiring, I could pick, there's thousands of guys that want a job. So it's like I would want someone that showed that they had the brains and the dedication to first get an education, because there's a lot of responsibilities that come with making WWE style money and being in airports. You have to be able to carry yourself like a professional, to hold conversations. You have to, you're representing. I'm representing the NWA 24 hours a day. I don't want to let them down.
Right on. That's great. That's great advice, and appreciate you giving it to our listeners out there, young aspiring wrestlers that are looking for that type of information. And as far as listeners that are fans and want to follow Rob Conway, what's your social media? What's places people can keep up with your career?
Well, they can Facebook. It's Robert Thomas Conway or Rob Conway 2, and then on Twitter it's the Rob Conway. And the thing about fans is that I always, people come up to me, Drew, and they'll say, man, you don't understand what a big fan of wrestling I am. And I'll say, oh, yes, I do, because I've dedicated my whole life to it. And I still watch videos and watch guys' matches and I watch at least about 8 or 10 hours of pro wrestling a week, on either YouTube or on the network or NBA Classics. You're always learning, and it's still fun to watch. So that's the thing, is I've got nothing but respect for fans, because I am a fan, and I still love it.
Most definitely. Where's some of the places guys can see you live? You got some shows coming up that you'd like to let the listeners know where they can find you?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, coming up just on the 20th of this month, I'm going to be in Madison, Indiana. And then I'm really fortunate to not have to travel very far, just Shelbyville, Indiana on the 21st. Then I return to Evansville, Indiana, for New Focus Wrestling at the historical Memorial Auditorium on Wednesday, June 1st, which Wednesday seems odd, but in Evansville, that's the tradition of wrestling, is Wednesday at the Coliseum. It's like in Louisville, Kentucky, it was always Tuesday night at the Louisville Gardens. Then Sign Guy was saying about HPW, where I was inducted in the Hall of Fame last year. I'm returning there June 4th, which is the first Saturday of the month. And I'm excited about coming back to the 4-H fairgrounds and getting a chance to see Jerry Wilson. And I'll be headed. I've got a few more things coming up, actually in June, and I'm not going to bombard you with dates, but this is kind of exciting for me, is that at Legends of Wrestling in Monroe, New Jersey on June 11th, I'm going to be reuniting with Sylvain and Renee for the first time since 2004 for a wrestling convention. So it's going to be exciting to have the whole group of La Resistance back together for the first time since they had the first draft in 2004 and Renee went to SmackDown.
That's real cool. That's real cool. And Rob, I really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing your time and your knowledge with us on the show here and going over your career with us. I'm going to pass it around one last time for final questions. Sign Guy, what you got?
One last question I would have, as someone that's been with the NWA for quite some time and as someone that has traveled to a lot of the different NWA affiliates, who are some of the people that you've seen that you think are going to carry the mantle for the NWA in the next few years? Some of the younger guys on the way up.
Some of the guys on the way up that, maybe not this year or next year, but they're getting there. There's a guy by the name of Houston Carson out of Texas. He's a fantastic young wrestler. I mean, he's been the North American heavyweight champion before, so he's already, moved his way up. There's another kid by the name of Ricky Starks out of Texas. that has a ton of potential, a great attitude, very athletic. Up in Indianapolis, Jonathan, he goes by the Lone Wolf, Jonathan Wolf, but he's only 18 years old, and he's got a ton of charisma. You know, he's working out hard, and every place that he goes, the fans just gravitate to him. So he's another up-and-coming, star within the NWA. Jeremy Moore is a guy out of NWA Mid-South. He's actually their heavyweight champion already. You know, guy looks like $1 million. He looks like a male model, but he's a hell of a wrestler. He's been wrestling since he's about 14 years old. So there's a lot of guys out there that when the time comes and they get their opportunity, I think that they'll seize it. And I think it's, guys like me and Drew and Jax Dane and Tim Storm and Matt Riviera, it's our job, to get a national platform for the NWA to be able to shine on television, and then eventually for the guys, the up and coming guys, eventually take it over and be household names of tomorrow.
All right. Will Huckabee, you have any last questions?
Yeah, this is
Stormin. It's storming here in Indiana.
I'm sorry. This is the question for my own personal selfish reasons. I've got to ask. You've been in the ring with two of the greatest technical wrestlers of the modern era, in Nick Dinsmore and Chris Benoit. Who was harder to work with? Who was more intense in the ring? Who was way, like, when you got in the ring with, you just realized you were so far out of your element? And which one of them two was did you enjoy working with more?
And I couldn't say I've wrestled Nick because he'd only been wrestling like 8 months when I started, so me and him had pretty similar training. And I could go, I could wrestle Nick tomorrow for 30 minutes and we haven't touched in 5 years. I'd feel completely comfortable. Chris Benoit, on the other hand, I loved wrestling Chris Benoit, but the thing about him was that if you were going to wrestle Chris and you knew you were wrestling him, you prepared mentally and physically for hours prior to that match. I mean, you had to make sure that you warmed up and stretched and got mentally focused, that when you came out of that match, you felt as if you had been in some type of a war. Win or lose, you knew you were getting chopped repeatedly. You knew that he was going to get behind you and you were going to take German suplexes. I mean, it was just he was a different than anybody else that I ever wrestled. It really had that, man, you're wrestling Chris. You better lace your boots up tight tonight, because he brings it the intensity was unmatched. Even like a William Regal, great technical wrestler, and I wrestled him probably close to 100 times. But physically, it wasn't the same as going into a match with Chris Benoit.
All right, Drew.
Well, Rob, again, we appreciate you on, and thank you very much for doing that and sharing your story with us tonight on Undisputed Wrestling.
I appreciate you guys having me.
Right on. You're welcome back anytime, my brother. Greatly appreciate it. And I will see you in Shelbyville, I think, is the next time.
Oh, you're going to be in Shelbyville?
Yeah, I will be there. It's the 21st, right? I'll be there then.
Yes. Yeah, I'm excited about that place.
Yeah, it was. They packed it last time. It was at capacity, standing room only, and it was a good time.
Yeah, I think they're using a bigger building this time. So I'll see you then, brother.
Right on. Take care. Thanks again.
Appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Right, what do you think with the Iron Man? Bob Conway on with us tonight.
Absolutely. 2 HPW Hall of Famers on the phone. That might be the first time in history that's ever happened.
It very well may be. What was you saying, Huck?
Nothing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all friend. What do you guys, before we get our next guest in here in just a couple minutes, what do you guys got going on? What news? Any news out there you guys want to talk about?
I have something. It got announced just a couple days ago. Piper Palooza 2 going to be happening in Portland, Oregon at NWA Blue Collar, and it is a memorial show for Roddy Piper. The last one was in Tacoma a couple of months after he passed away, and appearing on this year's Piper Palooza, first time ever appearing in Portland, Oregon, will be the Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan.
Awesome. Friend of the show, Kevin Sullivan.
Absolutely. I believe he'll be stopping by soon to talk about that Piper Palooza show.
Good deal. It's always great to have Kevin on. Will, what do you got for news going on?
Well, first, I was going to ask, Sign Guy about Piper Palooza. Like, is it just a benefit show where the proceeds go to his family, or are they giving away scholarships to aspiring young wrestlers, or to young and hungry wrestlers to further their training, or is it just a celebration of Roddy Piper's life?
It's more of a celebration of his life, more of a memorial show. Last year, his son Colt was in attendance, and he got in the ring, talked about his father. He stayed for the entire show. A lot of the matches had Roddy Piper-esque spots to them. They were just mainly there to try to pay tribute to Roddy Piper. A lot of people in Oregon worked with him at Pro Wrestling Uncut, which was around not too long ago. Roddy Piper had a big part of that, so a lot of the independent guys knew him from that, and they just wanted to pay tribute.
So I confirmed that now, wasn't his son training to be a wrestler? Is he still a wrestler? Did he walk away from the business? What's going on with his son, Colt?
I believe Colt sort of walked away when Uncut went away. He was the tag team champion down there with a guy named Pat Large, and he was there pretty much the entire run of Uncut, but really I don't think he continued with it after that. He was more into MMA really than pro wrestling, so I think he just kind of drifted away from it when Roddy Piper wasn't active with the company anymore.
Oh, okay. Thank you for explaining that. Now, Drew, to answer your question, as far as news goes in the wrestling world, as far as I'm concerned, I have no idea. Like, you know, as we all know, this past weekend was Mother's Day weekend. I actually had like a wrestling-free weekend for the most part. Of course, you know, I pay attention to social media and stuff, and I think the biggest thing I want to talk about before our next guest come on is the fact of, you know, guys posted videos where guys are getting hurt, where guys are doing these ridiculous spots. I'm pretty sure both of you saw the video that was passed around on social media where the young wrestler, and I don't know the guy's names, I've never met the guys who were involved in this video, but two guys are wrestling. One guy's from the table on the outside of the ring. Another guy goes to do a dive, a plancha over the top rope. And when the guy on the table moves, and this guy basically eats the entire concrete floor. And it's made its rounds. Of course, people have different opinions on that. I don't want to ask you guys your opinions on the spot or the wrestlers, or even if they're good, or you think they're trash bags, you think they're one, as Jim Cornette would say, they're flippity-do wrestlers. But what do you guys think about guys who see these kind of videos and immediately form an opinion about the guys in the videos?
Go ahead, Conway.
My opinion on it was just ignoring the fact that it looked a little bit risky for the wrestlers involved, but obviously anytime you get in there, there's risk to it. It seemed risky for the fans because you're diving into where the fans are sitting and it's pretty close to them. You can't control tables and chairs when they go flying all of the time, and you're putting the promoter at risk when you do that, because if a chair were to come up and hit a fan in the face, break their nose, company's probably going to be shut down there because the insurance isn't going to renew them. Promoters going to get sued over stuff like that. So it's just risky for the promotion, I think, letting guys do that. I know a lot of fans love the dives out to the floor. A lot of fans like that type of style, but at the same time, there's a dangerous element to it, and you're putting the fans in unnecessary risk. It's one thing to put yourself at risk, one thing to have your opponent assume some sort of risk, but when you're putting people that paid to be there to watch the show at risk, then you're taking it to a whole different level.
What about you, Drew? What do you think?
I think if I got your question right, it's more so about the guys jumping to the quick conclusions, right?
And yeah, that's exactly what I know. Like, what about guys who don't know these guys and stuff, but they immediately form opinions about them and stuff?
Unfortunately, that's kind of what we've come to. You know what I mean? It's like Rob was talking about, you know, guys, it's not like it was before where you would just keep your mouth shut and be a sponge and, you know, if you had an opinion, if someone asked you a question, you would share it. Now everyone wants to share their opinion, whether or not you want to hear it or not. They want to do it on social media. And a lot of people that are sharing their opinions, quite frankly, like Rob was talking about earlier, they shouldn't necessarily have one at the stage of where they're at in the game, especially sometimes comparable to the people that they're talking about. You know, so many times we hear guys talking about people that are, you know, on the top in this business, doing exactly what they got in their business to do, but yet they're, you know, being overly critical publicly. I don't think necessarily people should jump to putting their opinion on a platform like that.
And one more thing, one more topic, and of course related to social media. And the only other thing I paid attention to all weekend was former guest from the Undisputed Wrestling Show, Jim Cornette. Of course, we all know how opinionated Corny can be, how he is such a stickler for old school wrestling and stuff. And this past weekend, he kind of had a war of words against basically all of like professional wrestling, I guess you would say. You know, he made a comment about Kenny Omega that was not, his opinion on Kenny Omega was not shared by basically anybody on his Twitter feed. And then of course, you know, Ricochet, who also basically has the same style as Kenny Omega and is also a member of the New Japan Pro Wrestling roster, basically came to Kenny Omega's aid, said something, and Jim Cornette basically called himself, insulting him and called him another flippity-doo wrestler. Ricochet responded back that, hey, I'm not a flippity-doo wrestler, I'm the flippity-doo wrestler. My question for you guys is, should we really pay attention to Jim Cornette at all, you know, right now? Does he still hold any relevance? Is he still relevant right now in professional wrestling? Or do you think he's just, you know, bitter? Is he just, you know, angry about the time going by, time passing by? What is your opinion about, you know, every time we turn around, Jim Cornette is making these posts, basically burying brand new talent? Drew, let's start with you first.
I love Jim Cornette, and I will not say anything negative about him. So go ahead, Sunday.
Also a big Cornette fan. I agree with a lot of what he says. It's really kind of a generational gap, I think. I think a lot of what the Twitter feed was about mainly fell into kind of a generational gap, and you're going to get that in not just wrestling, but any type of business, I think.
Now, Drew, I don't want to let Drew off the hook on this one because I know that you know Jim Cornette, Drew, and you've been in the business for 14, 15 years, so you've seen the landscape of professional wrestling change. When it comes to, you know, posts like that where guys are burying or basically shooting on guys like Kenny Omega, who's out there hitting the roads, is out there working with New Japan Wrestling, and is basically taking a really bad situation with WWE basically raiding New Japan's roster and taking, you know, basically the top three guys from the Bullet Club and having to step into that role that was first filled by Prince Devitt and then AJ Styles, and now he having to step into that role unannounced and everything. as wrestlers, and this is supposed to be a brotherhood, should we be supporting each other, or do you think it's okay for us to judge each other and comment on each other, kind of like how Jim Cornette does, Drew?
I love Jim Cornette, and man, I love Jim Cornette. That's all I'm gonna say.
You said not gonna give us the answer, Drew.
I'm staying on this hook, man.
All right, so can we at least coin the phrase? Can we at least, trademark the phrase "flippity do"?
He probably already got it. Him or Bolin, because Bolin will try anything to make a buck. He's already got a coin and selling shirts. Well, speaking of news, I got a bit of news earlier today, and it just hit Facebook, social media. About an hour before the show. So if you're one of my 5,000 Facebook friends, hello, Facebook family. If you follow me on Twitter, whatever, you probably already know. But Heroes and Legends 7. My opponent has been announced. Damian Sandow versus Drew Skills. It is going down.
That should be an outstanding matchup. I think that's going to be a classic.
It's going to be something for sure.
My question is, are you going to run basically like you did against Abyss?
Excuse me?
I just asked. Run?
There was no running. We fought best 2 out of 3 falls, and I walked away with my title.
Based on technicality. So, once again, are you going to actually face Damian Sandow man to man, or are you going to basically, pull a Drew Skills?
I'm going to face him monster to man, and I'm going to retain my title like I always retain my title.
That is, Drew, first of all, congratulations about that match. Because, that's really crazy that, he just got released, last week? And he's already, getting, and that's a good thing. That says a lot about the state of professional wrestling in a good way, that, guys like him, are still in demand. You know what I'm saying? As soon as he gets released, it's you know what? It's okay. I'm going to do what I do and make my name on the indies. And hopefully, his match with you isn't too hard. Or you don't think the joint too bad, Drew, to where, the powers that be at New Japan or whatever will be afraid to bring him in because, but he can build his work back up and do like AJ Styles and a lot of other guys and go back to WWE, work even more than what he is now.
Man, the thing with Damian Sandow, and it's funny because I was talking earlier today to my partner Apollo, and because I wasn't privy to, I didn't know who all got released last week. I wasn't sure of all the names, so I asked him. And Damian Sandow was one that I remember, and I just don't get it, and again, I do not run $1 million company, the force that is WWE, so I'm not presuming to know more than they know or whatever, but to me, when you got a guy who knows how to get over, you find a way to do something with them. There's so many guys that they push that don't get over, or can't get over. This guy knows how to get over and proved it, on more than one occasion. So I don't really understand the disconnect there and why they didn't, or why he's even available. But the fact that he is available and I'm going to face him at the next Heroes of Legends show is a blessing, and I'm happy about it. And I like to say I'm rocking with the best, and, the only way to prove that is to get in there with the best, and he's definitely one of the best guys that is available today. So I'm really happy about that, and can't wait for that to happen.
Now, here's my question. Is Damian Sandow his real name? Because I'm assuming that most of the time the guys in WWE, Vince owns your name, and so, of course, they have to use a different name. How in the world is he able to leave WWE and still use the Damian Sandow name and hopefully the gimmick?
Yeah, I have no idea. When he got signed, he was Aaron Stevens. So I don't know how that is, or if we'll have to, get some new publicity out because we change it later after a cease and desist. I don't know, but that's what I was told was Damian Sandow. So unless that changes, I don't know how that happened. So yeah, good question, man. Most of the time that is the case.
I want Sign Guy, before we call this guest, I got to ask Sign Guy a question. I'm not going to ask you, Drew, because I kind of feel like I already know your answer. Sign Guy, out of all the people who were released last week from WWE, who do you think is going to make the biggest impact on the indies and stuff? And who do you think that in the next 5-10 years we're going to be talking about them like we're talking about Luke Gallows? You know, and Luke Gallows got released from WWE about 5-6 years ago, went back to the indies, remade himself, went to New Japan, blew up, and now got signed to WWE, re-signed back to WWE, and is worth twice as much as he was when he left. Who are we going to be talking about in 5-6 years that just got released like that?
I think the guy with the biggest upside potential probably is Riley, because I think he's got the biggest upside that hasn't been capitalized on just yet. Sandow, I think, will probably do very well on the independent circuit because he's got the biggest name recognition, if you don't count Hornswoggle, who had a pretty fair name as well. He was in a lot of major angles over the years, but Riley wasn't used as much, so I think he has kind of a buzz from NXT, and I think he's got more of an upside because people are going to not be looking at his body of work from the WWE and comparing what he does on the independents to that. I think he has probably one more run left, at least, in the WWE in a few years.
Drew, if you want to answer it, feel free to. But I kind of already assume I know who you're going to say, but go ahead if you want to.
I think it's you know, like I said, the guy knows how to get over. He is over, and I think you know, he's going to sell a lot of tickets for people to come see him.
Cool. All right, so what are we doing next, guys? Are we going to go ahead and call our next guest, Kev?
Hello?
Is this Kerry Awful?
Unfortunately, it is.
What's going on, man? We tried to call your tag team partner, Nick Iggy. We're going to try to call him back in like 10 minutes because I told him 10:30. So we're going to do 10 minutes with you by yourself, and then we'll call Nick. How's that sound?
Sounds wonderful to me.
All right.
How's everybody doing tonight?
We're doing. Hold on, man. Hold your horses. Jesus. Man. All right, let me give you a formal introduction, all right?
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest on the show is one half of the current NWA Saw Tag Team Champion, 1/3 of the 2015 FIP 6-man Tag Team Tournament Champion, one half of one of the most hated yet loved tag teams in the South right now. We're talking about Team IOU. Ladies and gentlemen, right now we're on the phone, Kerry Awful. Kerry, what's going on, man?
Not a whole lot. Just hanging in on Twitter, trying to see how many people I can get vote in this poll about Huckabee. Yeah. Are y'all familiar with this poll, by chance? And just real quick, how free can I get with 4-letter words? If I've got the mouth of a sailor, so I'm going to try to abstain.
Hold on, Kerry, hold on before we get to this poll. I want to go ahead and introduce you to my co-host. Right now we have the, besides myself, we have the Heroes and Legends champion. The guy who's been the Heroes and Legends champion, if I'm right, for over 1,000 days. Is that correct, Drew?
Just over 1,200, I believe, 1,250, something like that.
He's been the Hero.
Mr. Skills.
Yeah, up there, and Drew Skills. And then my other co-host, Kevin Sullivan's favorite referee. He said it on this podcast that this guy is the greatest referee he's ever been in the ring with. And Kevin Sullivan was in the ring with my favorite referee, Charles Johnson. My other co-host is Sign Guy. Sign Guy, say what's up.
I've also been in the ring with Kerry Awful, but I can't confirm that I'm his favorite referee.
Oh, of course you are, Sign Guy. Come on now. You'd be like that.
How you doing, Kerry?
I'm doing good. I barely recognized Huck's voice for a second. He called me. I seriously thought it might have been Bill Cosby on the phone with me. That was the most whitewashed I've ever heard your voice in my life. Good evening, sir. How are you today? I'm doing good. I'm used to hearing you be like loud and boisterous. This is weird. It's putting me out of my element. I'm doing good, gentlemen. How are y'all doing?
Doing very well. Doing very well.
All right, before we get to the interview, go ahead and tell Drew and Fine Guy and our producer, I'm sorry because I forgot, the greatest producer in podcast history, Killer Kev, is also on the line listening in. He might want to ask you a question. He might not. I'm not sure. But go ahead and tell the guys about this ridiculous, whatever you got going on Twitter.
Doing what we normally do on, social media anyways, because, I think this might be the only evidence in all of history that we've talked civilly to each other that anyone's ever known. Because, we both to an extent believe in kayfabe and keeping that real, and especially after that hellacious dog collar match we had. Joking around on Twitter normally gets, people riled up into believing and suspending their disbelief into a different way, So, joking around, we want to stick those pot shots at each other. So I made a Twitter poll that asked what you, or Huckabee, I guess I should say, because, other people listening, I asked what he bathes with, since it's not a washcloth and soap. And I think one of them was despair and loneliness, and the other one was a cheese grater. And I forgot what I put for the other part of it, but it was something offensive. Let's see. Let me pull it up real quick. Give me 1 second.
Oh, you see what I got to deal with, Drew?
I'm a character, man.
Yeah.
Drew's no stranger. Drew and I walked up, too, over at Proving Ground Pro. That was a Midwest dream match that people hounded us for. And it was probably one of my favorite tenured matches I had at Proving Ground. We'd actually just, finished up over there.
Yeah, that match was a lot of fun, man.
Well, it was just cool because, we had that common link of Tasha Simone and didn't even know it at the time. And whenever you see, it's so funny to me how, you'll meet people that, on face value, you'll be like, oh, this guy and I probably don't have a lot in common, or our beliefs in wrestling might be different. And then you sit down and you talk to them, and then you find out, this person and that person. Then you just snowball that out into a conversation. It's like, oh, my God, we could have been separated at birth. And I feel the same way about Huck, too. Man, on paper, if you would put me and Huck or me and Joe and Huck and Iggy all on paper, you'd be like, these guys will not make good grappling. They won't make a good box office. And it turned out to probably be our definitive feud of the year this year, and maybe our first definitive feud we've had since the Hooligans. I can't stress enough, now or enough how important, good adversaries in wrestling is, because anyone can have, badass exhibition matches, but when you have a rivalry with people that can put emotion into a match, fuck high spots, they can have people believing that they are ready to fucking disembowel each other. That's wrestling. That's rivalry. That's storytelling. That's Magneto versus Charles Xavier. You know what I mean? That's, I don't know, Superman and Lex Luthor. And that's kind of what is now over in Atlanta.
Well, Nick, Kerry, before we start getting into feuds and, wrestling and everything, go ahead and tell our listeners who's not familiar with Team IOU, which if anybody's a fan of especially tag team wrestling, they should definitely check you and Nick out. But on your side of the whole story, tell our fans how you got into wrestling, who trained you, and about how long you've been wrestling right now.
Oh, man, I can't tell. This is going to ruin so much things if I say this. I've only been wrestling for about 5 years. Nick's been wrestling for about 6 years. We're still greener than grass shit. But we've both been blessed very well to have some of the greatest teachers and mentors that you can have in wrestling. I was originally trained by Dirty Dutch Mantel. I was then polished by 3-time NWA Women's World Champion Tasha Simone. I was then mentored by Mickey Knuckles and Wolfie B at different times. And you always have this, weird cast of characters that come in and out of your life to help you at times. Right now, Jimmy Rave's done a whole lot to just change how I view psychology and give me advice and placement on things and how I approach every match, every story, every promo differently. And I always tell people that it's kind of like you go to school, wrestling school, and that's your high school education, and then your mentors are almost like college level educators. And some of the stuff that Jimmy will have me watch, he would send me matches and break them down to where he'd have me studying specific bumps from matches. And so it's almost like trying to learn, physics by that point, just like real complex stuff to break it down to even like that level. Nick was originally trained by Reno Riggins, famous journeyman. Most people commonly associate Reno for his enhancement work in WWF, but also as a Southern tag team as being part of the Tennessee Balls, which was just a staple of Southern wrestling for so long. And of course, Reno ended up starting it before it was NWA Saw, but Saw in general, when it was just Showtime All-Star Wrestling. He was also heavily mentored. Probably he was mentored more by Wolfie than I was. He actually got me in with Wolfie to where we all started kind of working out together and things of that nature. And of course, he was mentored by Tasha Simone and Mickey Knuckles also. We actually were just two white meat baby faces in Tennessee whenever we met each other. And this is, I run a lot when I talk, and I'm outside of character, and it's just kind of shooting straight with everybody. So if I get long-winded or you have to rein me in, just, hit me with a text or something, or hit a button, and I'll get the Iggy to go home on it. But,
I'm about to say before we get into how you two guys got together, Kev, if we can try to call Nick Iggy so we can get both of you guys' perspective, because I really want to hear what you guys first thought, your first opinions on each other were, because y'all was so different, not only in wrestling but also in real life.
Oh yeah, this is a pretty funny story. I'll wait till Nick gets on for that. Let's see if he actually answers here.
What's up?
What's up?
What up? This is the legendary Nick Iggy.
All right.
Nobody said that before, Nick.
Let me give you the formal introduction I gave Kerry. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the other half of Team IOU, the other half of the current NWA Song Tag Team Champions, another third of the current 2015 FIP Fallout 6-man Tag Team Champion, and the other half of Team IOU, Nick Iggy. Nick, we were talking to Kerry about, Nick, we also have on the phone the Heroes and Legends champion, Drew Skills, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with.
Of course.
Sign guy who was Kevin Sullivan's favorite referee and the greatest producer in podcast history, Killer Cav. We were talking to Kerry about how you guys, who you guys are trained by, and he told us who you guys are basically trained by, mentored by. But my question for both of you two before I pass it around the panel is, what was you two guys' first impression of each other when you first met? So I'm going to start with you, Nick.
Oh, man.
I'm going to start with you, Nick. What was your first impression of Kerry?
Me and someone not to be named in the locker room, the first thing you said.
Oh, no, it wasn't. At first I saw you and I thought you were a goof. I thought he was the biggest goof because he was wearing the stupid cabbie hat, stupid fucking facial hair that was twisted up. I was like, this dude sucks. This dude sucks. Then he was talking to another wrestler, not to be named, and my buddy Darren Flynn leaned over to me and he goes, "It's like the blind leading the blind." And I was like, "You got that right." So first impression, it was like, who the hell is this guy? Because I thought I was hot shit back in the day.
Kerry, what was your first impression of Nick when you first saw him, man?
Man, I don't know why you did the 619 for a finish. It looks so dumb.
Oh.
The first thing I saw him. I was at Warner's on Thursday nights for NWA main event. We were so different back then. When the first time I saw Nick was actually built on, he was at the top of the card, and he was drawing, his feuds were drawing, 300 people, on, really good nights, but at least 100 people on, average nights on a Thursday night or Wednesday night, whenever it was in Nashville. So I was like, man, that guy, he's booked at the top of the card. I want to figure out what he's doing to do that. And we became friends through friends and stuff. And I guess, essentially, some stuff happened where we all had, a tight-knit group of friends, and some fallings out happened, and me and Nick ended up just kind of being on one side of it. And I was wrestling for Pro Wrestling Freedom in the first iteration of it, and I realized that in wrestling, there's only so many spots for top guys. If you got a roster of 10 people, and there's only one tag match on the card, you're going against 8 other guys to be in that top spot. And looking like I do, which is like shit, I realize that like I'll never necessarily be that top guy, but I can be the top of the tag team, and there's always going to be at least one tag match per card. And so, even though Nick and I were doing singles careers, I ended up kind of throwing the idea around about us teaming, and we got brought into NWA Saw as a tag team after ending a single feud. And it kind of just like snowballed out of there. That's like me really condensing the story down because we told it a few times. But I guess really what it boils down to is I knew Nick could teach me things that I didn't know, and I felt like I could teach Nick things that he didn't know. And where I was weak, he was strong, and where he was strong, I was weak. And it's still like that today. Like there's still every day or every road trip, every Thursday through Sunday sometimes, we learn something new together, and it's either about each other or about ourselves. And we just kind of decided, like, if we're gonna do this crazy journey of wrestling, we're gonna do it together because hell, that's what wrestling's for, is like making friends and adventuring and like sharing that with people, like your triumphs and your sadness, whether it's the fans, the boys, or my tag team partner.
So, in other words, what you're trying to say is you didn't like Nick either. Drew, I'm gonna go ahead and pass before, because obviously Kerry likes to hear stuff talk. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to the Hero of the Legends champ for almost 1,200 days, the man who ran from Abyss, Drew Skills. Drew, what do you have for Team IOU?
Yeah, I ran from no one, Huck. But anyways, what's how y'all doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Great.
You got that match with Sandow coming up. That's fucking hot.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's gonna be good stuff, man. I'm looking forward to that.
Look, you gonna slip me that YouTube link if it's a private link? You're gonna help hook a brother up. Let me see it. I gotta see the match.
We'll see what we can do. Most definitely.
Yeah.
When I first heard about you guys, this young tag team that everybody wanted to see the Soul Shooters work with, I heard it all the time. But when I first started hearing it, you guys were a boy and his dog. Tell us a little bit about that and how you guys have evolved. Because we sure wasn't a boy and his dog that I went to war with. You guys were a couple grown men.
The boy and his dog kind of started, like Kerry said. He was at PWF. Actually, he was at SNPW in Carmi, Illinois. And he was teaming with Chris Norte at the time, and he used to have a catchphrase that was like, oh. And people just started barking at him. So he just kind of ran with it and started barking back and started doing a dog gimmick. And at that time, I was out with an injury with a meniscus tear. And that's when he contacted me. He's like, hey, they need people up here at PWF, Brothers and Freedom in Corbin, Kentucky. And he hit like 5 people up, and I'm the only one that contacted the booker at the time. So we were trying to think of a gimmick for me because I was just coming out to the ring with a sign that had my name on it. I was a white meat babyface and a sign that said Iggy. So we were trying to think of something that correlated with Carrie Awful, the dog, and I'm a big Disney fan. I'm a kid at heart. So I was doing the boy trapped in a man's body at the time, and it was fun for I think 2, maybe a little over 2 years that we did it. But we were realizing that we were just the novelty act, where we'd be brought in, have one match, and, we'll call you, brother. We might bring you back. And, I mean, back then, me and Kerry were both upset. We're like, we're good enough. Like, we know we're good at what we do. We're entertaining. We're good at wrestling. Why don't they bring us back in? But looking back at it, it is kind of hard to book a boy and his dog realistically where you're going to want to build a storyline around it. So that's why we started doing the Carney thing. I don't know, Kerry?
The Carney thing, like Nick said, like, brass tacks of it, like, I was doing a puppy because I felt like that was a different spin on the dog gimmick. And Nick was doing the boy in a man's body because, like, a dog should have a boy owner. And it was, like, a novelty act, and it was, like, we were heavily comedy-based and, like, American-style comedy wrestling. For example, like your Santinos and stuff like that. And even to a lesser extent, like, for me, like, Les Kellick from, like, Europe, like, still trying to do some cool stuff, but still trying to get some yucks from the crowd. And we realized that, like, it's almost like Dennis the Menace. Like, if you've read Dennis the Menace, you'll laugh at it, and if it's there, you might read it. But are you gonna like go out of your way to buy like, you know, a full collection of every Dennis the Menace comic strip that ever came out? And also, like with wrestling being like it's a combat sport, right? Who would really believe that like a boy would beat like a grown man or a puppy would beat a grown man? And so we took some criticisms that people had about the comedy version of our team, and we took some criticisms about us being Southern wrestlers, and turned it into Cardinals, because that's what we are. We're pieces of shit, grifters, you know, and realistically, Nick and I are very, like, humble, you know. I think it might be physically impossible for me to lie, because I have such a heavy conscience. But if people have those stereotypes about us, like, fuck it, we'll do it. And American Horror Story came out with a Carnival season, and that's just kind of like what we based it off of. Like, Dandy from the show is Nick's base of his character, the down south Dandy, the, you know, not necessarily a rich boy as much as this weird killer who thinks he's better than everybody, and he's got this weird bloodlust, and then I'm just this giant ogre of his muscle, you know? I go in there to do the heavy hitting.
Right on. Well, it's definitely working for you guys, and like I said, us meeting up with you guys was, like you talked about earlier, kind of a Midwest dream match. We were lucky enough, and we wrestled a lot of different tag teams and had a lot of fun and had some fun with you guys. What are some of the tag teams out there that you guys have on your list that you want to get in and lock it up with?
Plethora.
Yeah, and all for different reasons, too. Nick, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, like, I know currently that, like, realistic ones that we'd have, Monster Mafia, Bravado Brothers. I know Ohio is for Killers is on that list. I know Gargano and Ciampa are signing everything now, but I think that would be a dope match that we could really have some fun with. There's just like there's so many different combinations of people too, like even singles wrestlers that could be put up in a match with us.
And that's the thing, is it's like it's all this weird like time and circumstance that plays against us. Like, personally, like, as a Southern wrestling fan and as a tag team, like, I want to have this, like, rite of passage moment with, like, Iceberg and Tank. And I want to have this rite of passage moment with Dark City Fight Club. And being that we were in the Midwest, like, to wrestle y'all, like, the Soul Shooters, like, that was a deal for me. Just out of, like, respect that we went into y'all's territory and we did good business. You know what I mean? Like, when we got your respect after the match, like, that was like a badge for me, you know? That was like one of those things from my book. Like, I went against like the synonymous team of this area, and they said I wasn't too bad, you know? The two teams that most commonly get thrown at us is in the Mid-Atlantic region. A lot of people say us versus the Bravado Brothers, and you know, that's one of those matches where you have to like sit and be like, who's going to be smart enough to pull the trigger on this? Because you get people that message your feds like PWX or Smoky Mountain, or even down in Atlanta that say Bravados versus Team IOU. But it's just a matter, like, in two teams can want to wrestle each other, but if there's not a venue and not a crowd and not a white envelope with our payday in it, it's just not going to happen. You know, and I know that other teams most likely feel the same way. Same with Ohio's for Killers, and I know Ohio's for Killers has so many different iterations. My, like, dream version of that match would be us versus Dave and Jake. But with Jake just doing Rockstar Pro and not being as active as he used to be, that may not be an option, you know? But I would love to be in there with, like, Dave, Chris, and, like, Zachary Wentz. He's a good guy, like, the guy that he's mentoring, you know? Hey, if we're talking, like, all-time, like, fantasy match, as greedy as it is, it would be us versus the Dudley Boys. I can't think of, like, a better match that I could just have and be like, okay, I'm done. This is it. I don't need to do this anymore. I lived my dream, and I've reached the pinnacle of what I wanted. I grew up watching this team. I've faced some of our match women off this team. Like, that would be it.
What's your dream one, Nick?
Man, probably the Hardy Boys, since I was such a huge Hardy's mark growing up. And probably the Rockers, too. I mean, I know these days it would never happen, but because I'm such a Shawn Michaels mark, I'll admit it. Right. And most guys in the business are. Like, you ask who their number one is. a lot of them are going to say Shawn Michaels. So I think that'd be a big one for me. And then just kind of like a random one. Like I always talk to Kerry about this. London and Kendrick. For some reason, I just think I would love that. I think the styles, we're not similar, but it would be like a good clashing of styles.
It'd be very entertaining.
Very
entertaining. Very entertaining. Someone I would definitely want to watch. I appreciate you guys coming on, and I'm going to pass it on over to Sign Guy. Go ahead, Sign Guy. What do you got?
Well, I first met you two at the aforementioned Pro Wrestling Freedom, my first time in Kentucky, and I was actually in a match with Kerry Awful to referee that, my one match at PWF. There was a lot of talent at PWF. You had Jason the Gift Kincaid, you had Mickey Knuckles, you had Jake Christ, you had a lot of really talented individuals there. Do you think that being in an environment like PWF really helped elevate your game when you were young to be able to get more bookings and to be able to travel to places based on who you were in there with at the time?
Without a doubt. I'll go ahead and say Mickey Knuckles has helped us so much. Like, she is probably one of the top 5 people that we've crossed paths with that has helped us out. Just in the ring with traveling, getting our name out there, getting bookings, putting her name on us, and actually going to bat for us at a lot of places.
Not only that, but being a friend in general, we were actually just at her wedding. We were groomsmen to her husband at her wedding. You know those like moments where people say like you only count your real friends in wrestling on one hand. I would almost say that if Mickey's not number 1, she's number 2, because our lives have been so different without that. And even if like there have been times where just like having to talk about personal life, where it's like, how do you manage this? How did you juggle traveling? How do you do it now? Like with trying to be a normal human being, and she was just there for us. Mickey, you know, we would have never seen that if it wasn't for PWF. Nick and I would have never had a platform to perform or to test us to get to a higher ability, because that's how you learn. You wrestle someone better than you, right? Like you can learn something from everything, but generally, like, that's the idea. So, like, if you're in a locker room with such a high level of talent, like, you either push yourself up on that level, or you fall to the wayside and stop growing and don't go anywhere.
Like you guys were saying, you've moved on from the boy and his dog, a dog and his boy, and you guys marketed the comic books. You sold a lot of gimmicks. In the current state of things, have you been thinking of ways to market what you're doing now as far as merchandising, or do you think that this is a kind of a evolution for you where the merchandising isn't really going to be as important in this gimmick?
I feel like merchandising is always important. That way people are wearing your brand, and you're making money off it. So that's always going to be an important thing, to make money and to have people be into you and to wear it around. And if some random person sees it and asks about it, then they might search Team IOU or the Carnies, and that'll get more eyes on us. Plus, you know, we were doing the boy and his dog, and adults liked it, but it was more kid-friendly. So if we're working these more non-family friendly shows, it's going to appeal more to the adults who are going to want something a little more PG-13, that are going to want to wear a shirt with a dog mask and a nail file with a little bit of blood on it, rather than a boy and his dog waving and drinking high C. So I think, really, I mean, we're not doing anything as smart as the comic book, because, I mean, that was its niche market.
There's been a direct correlation with the new merch we're putting out now versus the merch that we had. We've actually made more money doing this than what we did back then. And that's
easily.
In my mind, is we had way cooler merch back then, but now we're selling out way more of it now.
The two of you have traveled quite a bit. You've gone up into Chicago, Indiana, Kentucky, like we said, Tennessee, of course, down into Georgia. Is there any specific region in the country that you haven't been to yet that you think you would fit in best as far as what the style in that region would be that would fit you more than other places?
We've got some stuff in the works right now. Some of it, we're not at liberty to announce exactly where we're going right now, but we are going to be going to Canada very soon. And I think that we're doing Canada and we're also doing New York, which is new territory for us. But it's not necessarily that I think that our style is best suited because people would be acclimated to it as much as we're going to give them a very southern taste of professional wrestling with crowd interaction, with what I would like to see, try to portray as dynamic selling or dynamic, facial responses to the crowd and try to take them on more of an emotional ride than just getting them there, dropping bombs and getting out. And I guess that's where we want to be. That's where we're getting ready to gear up for at least, I think, the next 4 months. We got, 1 to 2 dates in those areas coming up per month. So, and not only that, but that's like the mecca of, quote unquote smart mark wrestling or whatever you want to call it. That's the area where a lot of guys, that are good get held at a measuring stick and they get made or they disappear. That's why you see the guys from like North Carolina going up there and the guys out from the Midwest that go up there. And for Nick and I to represent Tennessee and the South in general, it's something we take great pride in. And we want to show people that there's still wrestling out here that can be applied and viewed everywhere and be entertaining. Nick, would you say about the same thing? Oh, did we lose him?
Well, my bad. I muted it.
I made you fall asleep is what it was. Gave it old sleep at that time.
Kerry just talked so long. I just started dozing off. Kerry's the talker. He's the businessman. I'm the secretary. I do the video work, the merch stuff. But regions, I feel like something we're good at is, like Kerry said, we're going to do our southern stick, but we can acclimate to any style. And I think that's one thing we pride ourselves in, that we don't just do one style of wrestling. If a team wrestles one way or another one wrestles another way, we can work with that and still be just as good. You can see us in Atlanta, and it'll be different than what you see in Tennessee, different what you see in the Carolinas or up north in Chicago or New York. You're always going to see something different, but I feel like we're always going to deliver.
It's kind of like sex. You can always do it the same way and it'll be all right, but we try to mix it up to keep it entertaining for everybody.
Exactly. It's always going to have that southern twist on it, though.
Now, the two of you have been promoting yourselves as carnies now, and I have to ask this. Do you speak carny when you're in the ring?
Not so much in the ring. Who's going? You going?
I'm trying to think. Tizarms, Gizaz, Tizan, Wizen, Gizaz Spizik, is it Hizard Fizzo, or is this two voices off? Tizu is under Stizan. Y'all catch that?
Trizu Pizzoints. Well, I'm going to pass things back over to Will Huckabee at this point.
I've got to say, and Kerry mentioned it earlier, Nick, that this is probably the first time in a public setting that we've actually been civil to each other. With that being said, I've got to ask both of you guys, like, you guys pride yourself on kayfabe and keeping kayfabe and stuff, and it's everywhere. If people follow you on social media, they realize they'll know, what's real and what's not. You guys are doing a great job at mastering and blurring that line between a real life and a work. Nick, I'll start with you first. How important do you feel it is, maybe not to wrestling, but to Team IOU? How important is it to the concept that Team IOU for you guys to maintain that kayfabe?
Man, that's a tricky subject because it's important to us, but we never want to keep it so much where we challenge everyone's intelligence. We do it to the point where we make people question, is it real or is it not? Is it predetermined, is it not? Like, are they really like this or are they not? But not blatantly telling them if they say something and being like, oh, no, you're wrong. And they're like, no, we know. And you're like, no, you're wrong. It's just knowing your audience and knowing who you're talking with. So, yes, it's important to us as a team, but not to the point where we're going to, like I said, challenge people's intelligence where they're going to think we're jerk-offs for acting like they're idiots. Which, I mean, some people are, and those are the ones that we could read and we know, like, they're going to buy everything. But then, of course, you got the smart marks, or smart marks that think they're smart, and you're still working them.
Absolutely. For me, that's like the moment I pride on, is because, like, brass tacks, unfortunately, wrestling has been, and wrestling is an art form, but unfortunately it's portrayed as just predetermined. To me, good art makes you get caught up in the moment, and you get lost that you get that feeling in your stomach. So kayfabe, to me, isn't saying, hey, guys, I'm punching this guy and I'm slapping my thigh. But it's the moment when I don't slap my thigh after I've been slapping my thigh on a forearm strike or a super kick, and I hit him and I say, you dumb motherfucker. Like, there was a moment that we had at AWE, and I think it was in that 8-man, where we blurred this little moment of the line to where we were striking or something, and I said, you big black bastard, why won't you stay the fuck down? And then the crowd just got silent for a second. And then I think that was like one of the key moments of them being like, wow, these guys really don't like each other. You know what I mean? Like, it's that moment where they think that, like, they know that wrestling is predetermined, but they don't know what's a shoot and what's not a shoot. And every time, like, for example, we get in the ring, they know, like, the winner is going to be the winner, but there are times in our matches where they're like, oh, they're shooting on each other. None the wiser that we're just doing business. You know what I mean? And in that aspect of kayfabe, that's what I try to keep hold in my heart and in my presentation of professional wrestling. I don't want my wrestling to be smooth. I don't want my wrestling to be graceful. I was always taught it should be like beat their dick into the dirt, spit on them, call them names, and then have the fans be like, I know wrestling's supposed to be fake, but man, when Huckabee dropped Terry on his fucking brain, good Lord, he must have done something to him, and they really don't like each other. They just have to wrestle with each other because that's what they're telling them to do. But I bet they're really fighting when they're in there. And that's, like, to me, what modern kayfabe is working a crowd into the frenzy of that.
All right, guys, we got to get ready to wrap this up as much as I hate to. I know we could go and we could talk another 2 hours about your love for professional wrestling, tag team wrestling. But before I let you guys go, I got to get your social media so the few idiots that are listening who don't follow Team IOU can now follow Team IOU right before I beat the shit out of both of y'all this coming Sunday at AWE.
Hey, brother, hold on.
Terry, calm down. We're going to start with Nick because he knows how to answer a question short and sweet. So, Nick, go ahead and give us your social media.
All right. Well, first, you can message Will Huckabee and tell him to go fuck himself. On Facebook, where you can also find us on Facebook, Nick Iggy or Carrie Awful. We have our Twitters. Carrie is at Carrie Awful. I am at IggyNJ210. You can follow the team at Team IOU. Instagrams at Carrie Awful, at Nick Iggy. And our Pro Wrestling Tees store, ProWrestlingTees.com/Team IOU. YouTube.com/Team IOU. I think that's all the social media we have.
But if you want to find other content, real quick, they should Google Team IOU versus the Soul Shooters and Google highlights from the dog collar match with the Sound of the Fury. They will not be disappointed.
And Terry, let's go ahead and let you talk for the last time. What do you guys got coming up this weekend, man? So where can our fans and listeners see y'all guys this week?
Friday we'll be at Pro Wrestling Freedom over it's like a border city between Louisville and Clarksville, Indiana. Tons of AWE style talent are going to be there, including Huckabee's tag team partner Joe Black, Trip Cassidy, Murder One, Chip Day, Team IOU, former IWA Mid-South heavyweight champion Shane Mercer and Isaiah. You'll also see us down
don't forget about Mickey Knuckles.
Oh, and how could I forget Mickey Knuckles and Nick Depp, of course. You can see us down at AWE Atlanta this weekend. I'm taking Saturday off, but I'll already be in Atlanta because I'm going to do a seminar with real Bob Evans. Because you should always learn as a professional wrestler, and that's something that not a lot of new cats do.
All right. Well, look, thank both you guys for being on the show. Hopefully we can get you guys back, in the next coming months and stuff. And actually, maybe we just need to have like a 2-hour team IOU special and stuff. But on behalf of Drew and Sign Guy stuff, I got to say thank you guys, all right?
All right. Thanks, Bob. I'll
Thank
see you
you guys.
Sunday. Be safe.
Thanks for coming on,
Beat
fellas.
your ass out, okay? Everybody remember
Yeah.
those. Bye.
Thanks for coming on, fellas.
All right, Drew, Sign Guy, man, another great interview. What do you guys think about Team IOU?
Team IOU is great guys, man. Real cool dudes. I really had a lot of fun with them. They shocked the hell out of me when they told me how long they had been in. They sure don't work that way, man. They work like they've been doing it a lot longer than they have. So that's saying something. So, really good dudes, man. And I was really enjoyed and had a good time working with them.
Two of the very best in tag team wrestling, I think. Team IOU, great talent.
All right, Drew, you want to take us home, man? What you got coming up this weekend, Drew?
This weekend, I am in Elkhart, Indiana for TW. Soul Shooters will be there. We are in a tag match, a triple threat tag match with a couple different teams, and they're gonna get beat up. So that's what I got going on this weekend. That's on Friday. It's going to be fun. I always have a good time beating people up with my tag partner, Apollo. How about you, Sign Guy? What you got going on?
I am moving this week, so I don't have too much going on outside of that, but NWA Blue Collar in Portland on Sunday. Always a great time, and they're gearing up for the big Hyperpalooza 2 later this month. So it should be a fun time down in Portland in the next few weeks.
Well, guys, as for myself, Friday night I'm going to be in Racine, West Virginia for Mega Pro Wrestling. I'll be in a tag team match with somebody one of my mentors and one of my original trainers in professional wrestling, Danny Bumgarner, goes by the name of Jesse Logan and stuff, who'll be facing a really top tag team out of Florida. They haven't announced the tag team yet, but all I know is that they're from Florida. They're supposedly a top tag team, so I'm hoping it's Lost Big Day hosts because I really love those guys. So that's why I'll be at Friday. Saturday, Princeton, West Virginia, West Virginia Championship Wrestling. I'm defending my West Virginia Championship Wrestling heavyweight title against, I don't know who yet. They haven't announced my opponent. I'm pretty sure it's somebody from the Black Skull Army up there in West Virginia. And then Sunday, back down to Atlanta for AWE. Myself and my good buddy Joe Black, known as the Sound and the Fury, we're part of a 6-team tag team gauntlet match, which is including not only us, our today's guest, Team IOU, Shane Mercer, Wildman Congo, Ortiz from up there in New York. I'm trying to remember, Spring Street Suicide Squad. Who else? The Ambassadors, which is Jacoby Boykin and his tag team partner and stuff. Chris Maine, Mickey Knuckles, Jimmy Raven's going to be there, Chip Day, Murder One. It's going to be a crazy show in Atlanta once again. So that's what I got coming up this weekend, guys.
Awesome, fellas. Well, it's been another great show, just like we predicted 2 hours ago that we were going to have a great show, and we did. Rob Conway, Team IOU, Will Huckabee, Sign Guy, our producer, Killer Kev, our executive producer, Rick Craig. This is the Undisputed Wrestling Show on the Angry Marks Podcast Network, the best podcast network for professional wrestling and mixed martial arts. Check us out, iTunes. Check us out, Google Play Store. We are everywhere. Subscribe to our pages. Make comments. Leave 5-star rating. This is an award-winning podcast just waiting on its awards. We will see you guys next week. You guys have fun.